We set sail in a coming-of-age drama about a group of boys travelling with Jeff Bridges on a boat that allegedly will have a disaster in it at some point. Honestly, I'm just surprised that I'd never heard of this movie before. Ridley Scott directed it, so let's check out White Squall. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Boner City, fellas.
This is a movie podcast. We are on 90s disaster season, so we're tackling our next movie in that category, kinda. Yeah, we're looking today at the most recent Patreon vote winner. I think the other ones were Firestorm and Avalanche, but the patrons voted for White Squall, which is surprising that I've never heard of it, just purely because Ridley Scott directed it, but it's one that went under the radar despite kind of paying attention to his filmography. But
I was going to say, somewhere around this time, one of our original schedules out for the year had a Ridley Scott season, and I don't think this was anywhere on the radar of that.
I don't think so. I think it was one my eyes glossed over. But it's based on a true story, and we'll get into it. It's about a boat, and obviously the disaster's pretty obvious. There's going to be boat shenanigans.
An avalanche, of course.
There's going to be a white squall. Now, I never heard that term before, so I didn't know a squall was a wave, but I've learned that now, so...
Squall is a brief windstorm, actually.
Okay, well, okay, but it causes a wave then.
Yes,
fine.
yes.
Whatever.
It causes choppy waves and whatnot.
Yes. But yeah, based on a true story, we all start spoiler-free though, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into the spoilers. I'll just say that if you are enjoying the episode, please do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch, and you can get bonus shows from me and David. I'll tell you more about them at the end, but you can get them over at Patreon. So, get this. So there's a few young faces in here, namely Jeremy Sisto and Ryan Phillippe are amongst the teenage boys in the cast.
Oh, man. Ryan Phillippe showed up here, and I was like, wow, all right. He doesn't show up a lot, so let's see what he's given in this performance. And it's like, it's a solid performance, but it's a weird role.
Yeah, obviously Jeff Bridges is the captain of the boat, the skipper, if you will. And he's obviously the big star of the movie. Yeah, I mean, honestly, didn't know a whole lot about this going in. What it actually is, it's a boat that in the early 60s, well, late 50s and early 60s, it was like a school boat where they take a small select group of teenagers, obviously funded by their rich parents, to go and spend 6 months or whatever it is on this boat. And the idea is that not only do they do some lessons on the boat and they have tests and stuff, there's some teachers there, but the idea is that the camaraderie, the sense of being part of the crew, will whip them out. It felt kind of like, maybe not quite as extreme, although in some ways it's more extreme, of like sending your kid off to military school because they're misbehaved.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, military school.
So that's the kind of premise of it. Like I say, this was a real thing that actually happened, which honestly, if I didn't know that, I would assume it was the most made up sounding thing in the world, but it really did happen, so fair enough.
I don't doubt the context of the movie happened, and I don't doubt, obviously, the big disaster aspect of it happened. It's all the points in between that I feel like were written solely for the sake of, let's get some dramatic tension going on here.
Yeah. I will say, there was a moment about 35, 40 minutes before the end of this movie. And this movie's about 2 hours and 8 minutes long, right? That's the runtime of the movie. About 35 minutes from the end, and I know because I pulled up the bar and it said X amount of time left. I was like John Travolta in Pulp Fiction looking around, trying to find a disaster. I'm like, where's the disaster? So the first thing I'm going to get out of the way here is that this isn't a disaster movie. The internet lied to me. It was popping up in all these 90s disaster movie lists. There is technically a disaster, yes, but it's very much just the ending of the movie as opposed to like the movie revolves around the disaster.
This is a disaster movie the same way that Climax is a dance movie. Is there technically dancing in Climax? Yes. Is it a dance movie? No. This is a coming-of-age story, and it is the most coming-of-age story that ever came of age.
To be honest, I would say Climax is more of a dance movie than this is a disaster movie.
Yeah. Fair enough.
There was more dancing in that. The weird as it might have been, there was still more dancing as the movie went on.
I I I had the same thought as you, but I obviously the title of the movie, White Squall, and all that, I knew we were eventually getting to it, but the only reason that I'm willing to give this one any slack on your end, like you personally,
Oh yeah,
is that it is a vote winner. Like, I feel like the things that win the votes are the things that are the most tangential to whatever it is we're doing.
Hold on.
Hmm.
Climax was also a vote winner.
Exactly my point.
Okay, I'll just say. So if this one isn't on me, then neither was Climax. Okay.
Climax, I'm still putting on you because it scared me and you put it in the running. But like this one, I understand why you were a little bit tricked by it because yeah, I'm on the wiki page for it and down in like the categories at the bottom, 1990s disaster films. It's listed there and it seems like based off the title, based off everything else going into the marketing, it seems like that would be a major focus of it. Unfortunately, it just isn't.
No. So we'll get into a bunch of the usual things, and also some weird like retroactive controversy with this movie, which is a thing. It's been adopted by the alt-right or something. I don't know.
I got a bit more info, but we'll get to it.
You could tell us in a minute. But before we get to any of that, though, let's just get the basics out of the way. David, what did you think of White Squall?
I thought this was a perfectly fine movie. I thought that this movie, it like I said, it's a coming of age story. We follow these kids as they learn to grow up and become men, and they learn the importance of teamwork and crew work and blah, blah, blah. It played the emotional beats where it needed to play the emotional beats. It got funny where it wanted to be funny. It was a perfectly fine coming of age story. It was not, by any stretch of the imagination, a disaster movie. And anybody who has ever put that onto a list of disaster movies either never watched other disaster movies or they had no idea that a coming of age story is its own totally separate thing. So, I mean, I guess if you're asking me in terms of how I think it is in terms of just being a general movie, it's fine. It's not anything that like I'm writing home to. It's nothing that I think stands out in the genre of coming of age stories. I think it's a perfectly okay made movie, but in terms of going into this wanting a disaster film, Christ, this is like bottom of the barrel because it's like 10 minutes of disaster and then just like, all right, that happened, moving on.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't really like it that much. It's, you know, like you say, it's perfectly fine is what it is, but for me, there's a moment early on where the closest thing we have to a main character starts like narrating because he's writing a journal, and every single time this narration came in, it's the most sappy, sentimental.
Oh yeah,
this is where we became men. Blah blah blah. Like I hated all of that stuff, and it's just the tone was not there for me. It was too much of a vibe that I just don't vibe with, I guess. So, I was 10 minutes into this. I was like, oh no, I've got almost 2 hours left of this, and I don't think of it. And I was like, well, yeah, but at least once we get to the disaster part, at least there should be some fun action. And I was waiting so long for disaster stuff to start happening. And to be fair, once it does, it is captured quite well. You know, the effects are good. You know, Ridley Scott knows how to direct, and the practical things they were doing, whether it was miniatures or sets that they were, you know, tilted on their side and filling with water, all that stuff. Well done. Can't fault that really. But goddamn, if I just wasn't into this like Wonder Years style look back at the early 60s and how boys became men, and what also didn't help is that I swear half of these teenage boys with the same haircut looked the exact goddamn same, and I couldn't tell them apart.
We at one point I feel like we get a core group that we're meant to identify more with. It's like 4 of them, including our quote unquote main character. But everybody outside that core group, and even within the core group, I was like, okay, I think I see a bit of peach fuzz on that one, which means you're Dean, right? Okay, moving on. Like, it is a challenge to separate these kids out.
Oh yeah, and I never got a single name really. I mean, the way I was thinking of them in my head was the main guy. There was Jeremy Sisto and Ryan Phillippe because I knew the actors, so I could kind of recognize them. And then there was like the bad boy character, and then there was the one who wore the glasses, and that was like the main five. And then the rest of them were all just kind of like red shirts.
I think there was a blonde one whose like major defining thing was that he stuttered, but like even then, I couldn't tell you which one he was. I'm looking at the cast list. There is a character in this named Todd Johnstone, who was played by Balthazar Getty. And the trivia in this is that the real Todd Johnstone showed up in this movie as his own father. Like, that was a little cameo. And I was looking for it, but then I realized I don't know who the hell Todd Johnstone is. Like, this movie, they had a section where they literally listed off their names, and I still couldn't tell you who was who.
Well, I'm pretty sure that was the bad boy character. Also, is that how you pronounce Johnston? You say John Stone?
I said it the way that the character said it in the movie. Maybe it's Johnston, but in my
I never caught
dialect,
that in the movie.
If there's an E at the end, that makes the O a long noise.
I mean, typically it does, but I feel like that pronunciation or that spelling here would just be said Johnston as well.
It's entirely possible I'm an idiot. I mean, that's entirely a possibility here. All I know is that I was trying to figure out which character it was because I saw that trivia beforehand, and despite actively looking for him, I never managed to piece together which character he was, which should tell you a lot about how these characters are differentiated.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's the bad boy with the slight sort of Elvis haircut. I don't mean slight, but...
I thought that was Dean, but...
Oh, no, that was... Who's Dean? Oh, yeah, maybe that was Dean.
That's what I'm saying. The main kid, the main four, Ryan Phillippe stands out because you just know what he looks like. We also have the main character of Chuck Geeg, who, I mean, that guy's 27 years old playing 15. So, yeah, he stands out as well. And then you have the rich kid who's taken away every once in a while. Jeremy Sisto, Frank Beaumont. And then you had Dean Preston, who I thought was like the bad kid who doesn't like being called stupid.
You might be right, but I thought Todd was the bad boy based on the photo here because he looks like him in this IMDb photo. He looks more like the bad boy kid.
I get that. I can see it, but I just, again, all the kids to a certain extent look the same. So if I had to guess, I would say Todd was possibly the glasses kid.
He might have been.
Because I think his father at the very end said, like, Todd, you know that's not true. So I think that was Todd.
Okay.
It doesn't make a difference. Honest to God, it really doesn't.
Yeah, no, I mean, it doesn't. So
one tiny thing I just wanted to throw out here with Jeremy Sisto. I just, as in like last night, just finished watching 6 Feet Under for the first time.
Oh, really?
And he, of course, has a very major role in that. So it was super weird to see him pop up in this 10 years younger, and yet very clearly identifiable as Jeremy Sisto.
What's funny is I just saw Ryan Phillippe in something.
Oh, what was he in?
I just watched MacGruber like a week and a half ago.
Okay, all right. Never watched that one.
Yeah, he's there. I mean, other than that, I only really knew him from I Know What You Did Last Summer, and maybe something newer that I can't remember.
I caught him in Cruel Intentions.
Oh, was he in that? Okay, I guess he is
Yep.
in that. I haven't seen that since I was like 12, so that one's
fair.
Faded into obscurity.
Yeah. And I don't think that there's anybody else on the rest of the cast that's really like a big thing. Jason Marsden I recognize, but only because he is a super prolific voice actor. So the moment he started speaking, I was like, oh, hey, it's that guy.
That's fair. Yeah, I didn't recognize. I mean, there's a couple of the minor characters that pop up towards the end. Some of the more, the adult characters who are actors who pop up in different roles. I can't remember his name, but the one who's kind of like the judge at the hearing towards the end. He
looks super familiar.
Yeah, he's a dude that pops up in stuff, especially in the 90s. He pops up in a lot of things. It's if you want a kind of saccharine look at the good old days where there's a bunch of rich teenage white boys who all look the same and they're kind of all assholes at the start of the movie, but over the course they bond and they stick their necks out for each other, and therefore age has become of them.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I get the appeal of this movie, especially if you are around the age of these kids, because the entirety of the plot centers around the idea that they're all sort of aimless. They all have their life like entirely mapped out in front of them. They can easily follow that, but they haven't found themselves. And it's not in like an artistic sort of way. It's in a way that like, they're depressed, they're angry, they're all these different things that are not good for them, and they have to learn to overcome that. And I get the appeal of it from the aspect of a lot of kids feel that way, especially in the teenage years. Like nobody understands them, and they want to find this purpose in life, this thing that's larger than them to believe in. But like you said, it's just so sugar coated and so saccharine the entire time, where it feels like it's trying to sell the idea of this specific lifestyle more than it is finding something bigger than yourself. And that kind of just off puts it the entire time for me.
Yeah, there's also something very specific about stuff made in the 80s and 90s about the 60s that just carries this weird sentimental tone. Like, I know obviously anytime you're doing some kind of nostalgic period piece and you're looking back 20, 30 years, it's possible to have that. But I feel like especially the 60s, when it's something that was made in the 80s or 90s, has this kind of vibe. It's like, obviously every generation is guilty of, like, when people get to the 30s and 40s and they're the ones making movies, they look back to the era where they were young kids and they look back with fond glasses. But there's something especially saccharine about the way the 60s are looked at. I'm even thinking of Forrest Gump, which was just a couple of years before this, and just stuff like that. There's a lot of that in this era, and I find all of it just a little bit too sickening for my taste.
I get what you're saying. I understand. I've definitely recognized that too. You either get the late 60s where we're practically in the 70s at that point, and then you start getting into like the harder drugs and like, New York in the 70s sort of vibes. But I feel like a lot of this early 60s stuff is that sort of, well, look, around this time we solved the what's the word I'm looking for? Racism.
Oh,
it's
right.
not actually solving racism, but you know what I mean. The Civil Rights Act and all that sort of stuff. We did all that, and it's like, yeah, no, we're in a peaceful time. There's not a huge thing going on. And then once Vietnam comes around, obviously, that's a whole thing. But this early period is very much always viewed in that sort of lens of, we were going to space and we were trying out amazing things. America was literally at the top of the world.
Yeah, well, aside from, the whole Cold War and Cuban Missile Crisis, which is
mentioned in this movie. Yeah. Which is, it's kind of weird how they just like have that offhandedly going on in the background, and like they mentioned the Bay of Pigs invasion going on as well. But then they can simultaneously justify it with like, look, there's a man out in space. Isn't that so neat?
Yeah, I also, and this is not to say that there's no good examples. Like, there are definitely movies that I like that are based in the 60s that were made in the 80s or 90s. One that comes to mind immediately is Matinee by Joe Dante, but that's a Joe Dante movie with a very specific sense of humor, and it's about celebrating all the dumb sci-fi movies people watched back in those days. Right. And it happens as the Cuban Missile Crisis is going on. So it's all about how the movies would cause a distraction from these like horrific things that might be happening in the world. It would be there to take your mind off of it. Maybe it's just something I can connect to a bit more. Maybe it's just specific director styles. But I like Ridley Scott. Typically, I like a lot of his movies, but he's very hit and miss. He's very up and down depending on the material. And goddamn, can you tell this is based on a book? Because it feels like a book adaptation.
I could literally pick out the chapters. I could be like, there's the next section, there's the next one. Look at, that guy went overboard. That's a whole climatic point in this chapter.
Yeah, or even just the fact that the narration from the main character, like, it's like, these are just lines lifted from the book, because it's so flowery, it's so speechy, and just, there's some lines, it's in the very end, so I won't spoil it really, but there's some closing narration where it's like, where, people go to be people and men become men, and, just like sort of like vague statements like that, and I'm like, oh my god, get over yourself, writer.
It's the burdens that all captains share, captains and fathers. It's like, shut up.
So yeah, all that stuff didn't do much for me. So for me, this is a very middling, sentimental, like, obviously it's based on a true story, and yes, people really did die, and that's obviously something that should be taken seriously and whatnot. But the movie, yeah, it's this thing where, like, I can see avenues they could have focused on a bit more to make it a bit more interesting to me. But the movie wants to spend most of the time building the camaraderie, and then, some stuff after the disaster, if they fleshed that out, might have been more interesting because there's more of a debate about what happened, and that could have been something that we could have looked into more. Or you could have Christopher Nolan this, where you were like you actually sort of jump backwards and forwards in time, and you have the framing device of the
cool.
that you could have done something like that even maybe.
I mean, I guess ultimately the problem that it comes down to is where it decided to place its focus. And it really was not caring about the fact that the ship sank. Like, that's not where it matters at all in this movie. It doesn't matter that there was a White Squall. It's all about these kids and how they formed a bond and how that bond is unbreakable by the end. And that's, if that's where they want to put the focus, fine. But I think the biggest thing that comes from me is I'm looking at the writers list, and one of the writers who wrote the original book is the main character, and it just feels like that sort of thing where he's too close to it, and it's too much of like, oh, this is my own personal story. I have to tell it as this most amazing thing that happened to me.
Yeah. I do not mean to shit on someone's real experiences, but I found this super sentimental in a way that just was not interesting to me. So, once was enough, is all I'll say. I don't expect I will ever go back to White Squall, which is good, because it's turned into some kind of conspiracy. Not a recruitment movie, because, I mean, to be fair to the movie did not intend this. It's not the movie's fault that they've co-opted some lines from it.
No, so just to give some context, I looked into this, and essentially it is a movie about a bunch of like white kids who are aimless, that don't know what they want to do, and they come into this belief in a higher thing, and they all fall in line as an obedient crew and whatnot. It's super duper leading on the right wing that exists nowadays, the alt-right and stuff like that, who all want that exact same sort of stuff, obviously. Not that this movie did anything to deserve that, but they adopted it. And there is a recurring line in this, which is, where we go one, we go all. And the whole conspiracy theories of like QAnon and the alt-right stuff, back when that was really taken off in early like 2019, 2020, that was adopted by them. They used that in a bunch of their different material and stuff like that. And again, I can see how they managed to enjoy this movie. And there's also the adoption of like the storm, which is a big thing in their conspiracy theories as well. I understand it, but it's nothing that this movie did. It was purely adopted because they wanted it, and the movie didn't come out the gates swinging for that side of the fences.
No. Okay. It seemed worth mentioning, because I know it's the thing. So, yeah. There, it's acknowledged. Screw them. Let's move on with our lives.
Absolutely.
It's worth mentioning that the main character is the one kid who I think really wants to go. Like, well, that's not entirely. I think a couple of them do as well, but like some of the other key examples definitely are more forced into it. Whereas the main kid wants to go and has to convince his father, or it's implied that he had to convince his father to let him go. Because his father just wants him to get a scholarship and go to a really fancy school. Like, go to Yale, go and do all that stuff.
This kid has given up his last year of high school to go do that, which should also give you a roundabout age for every single person besides Jeff Bridges in this movie.
Yeah, I think one of them is quoted at one point as 15, so it does vary a little bit. So some of them are a bit younger. But yeah, I mean, because other than the kids, obviously, you have Jeff Bridges as the captain, his wife is the ship's doctor, and also teaches a couple of the sciencey subjects, the ones that make sense for a doctor to be teaching. Right. And then there's the English teacher. I don't remember what his role on the ship was in terms of a crewmate, but he was teaching English because he was always quoting Shakespeare and shit.
Yeah, he struck me as sort of like a quartermaster sort of character. Like, we get a character who is actually the first mate, but he struck me as just kind of another person in that sort of realm.
Yeah, and then the other adult that's there is the cook, who doesn't teach
Yes.
anything. He's just the cook, but that's fine.
He's apparently also a Cuban national, which is, of course, a problem as the Cuban Missile Crisis is going on.
Oh right, yes, yes, yeah. But that's not his role on the ship, is what I was getting at. There's no.
Yes.
He's not got because everyone else has got like a ship position and then like a teaching position. He just has the ship position. So
Right.
yeah. So that's the setup. So there's a few adults on board, and they're with all the teenage boys. We do see the ship, take port a few times, so we get to see everyone kind of like hang out in various little sort of seaside towns and whatnot. So
It's going up. I can't remember what their final destination was of like where they were going to, but I do know that they were going down the coast of South America. So somewhere in South America is where they finally made their final embarkment, but I can't remember exactly where that was to.
They said 6,000 miles, so track 6,000 miles from Florida because that's where they left
Right
from.
on. Yeah. Or I could just check the plot synopsis here. That might be a little bit easier.
A real sailor uses the stars, David.
Well, thank God I have only ever been on like 2 boats in my entire life. I don't count myself as a sailor.
That's probably a very similar number to the amount of boats I've been on, to be honest.
Yep.
So, all right, there you go. That's spoilers. You ready for spoilers?
Is anybody still here? Does anybody
Does
care
anyone
about the rest
care?
of this?
I mean,
Yeah.
Jeff Bridges does fine. Like, he's obviously
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, no, I don't think that there's really a bad performance in this movie. There are performances that are obviously a bit more special, and I'm looking at Ryan Felipe for that one, but it's not like he did a bad job. It's just what the material provided him with and what he did with the character.
Yeah, I do find a couple of the teenagers early on, like when they were interested in the characters, I was getting a little bit of a, oh, that's this guy, and this one's this guy. It's a little bit tropey in that sense. Now, maybe it reflects the real people that were on the boat. And I can't really argue if that's the case, but it does feel like an assortment of just sort of archetypes as opposed to anything else.
I gotta say, I was fully expecting Glasses Kid to be the smart one, but it turns out he's just the pervert. So, got me on that one.
But I will say there was, during the disastery section of the movie, there was actually something that was not supposed to be funny that made me laugh quite a bit. It's not a movie with a lot of unintentional laughs, but there was one moment that really made me laugh.
Was it the wife?
Yes.
Yes, I laughed at the same thing. It's so dumb.
So, yes, we'll get into that. So, anyway, yeah, spoiler warning then for White Squall. You've been warned.
Yes. Mhm.
We'll get into it. So, oh god, this is.
I was gonna say, how do you want to begin this? Because so much of the early movie is literally just pick and choose whatever happens at that moment.
Some movies are easy to talk about because it's a simple flow from A to B to C to D, so on, right? Some movies are easy to talk about because there's some really strong themes and like through lines you want to like tackle one by one. And I'm like thinking, okay, we're at the point here in this review where we're going to talk about specific things that happen in the movie, and my mind is just going blank. Is there anything I actually want to talk about? And the truth is the answer is probably no, but I have to do it anyway. So we're going to do it.
How long do you think we could just sit here and talk about like Jeff Bridges as an actor or something before people get fed up?
What's funny actually is that his performance towards the end when we're in the hearing, and we're in spoilers now, so there's a hearing at the end, which we kind of alluded to anyway, but where when he's getting a bit more dramatic and he's sort of like being assertive with how he's talking to the court, as it were, and it's like a military court rather than like a it's not like a traditional judge
tribunal.
Yeah, it's all sailor related like personnel.
I think it's like either the Coast Guard or the Navy or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Because it's his ship's license or whatever the exact term for that is that's up for.
He was a master seaman, and he was losing his certificate of that.
I'm a master of seaman myself.
I was wondering where you were going to take it. I set you up. I wanted to see where you went, and didn't disappoint.
This is a movie where Jeff Bridges tries to master his semen, but ultimately fails, but realizes that it's okay that he's made a mess.
His semen was just too young and inexperienced.
But his semen forgave him in the end and clung to him anyway. Okay.
We actually do get a full sequence in this where one of the kids, like, during an offshore visit gets like syphilis or gonorrhea or something and then has to get shots for it. That is an entire part of this movie.
Hey, at least it was something where a shot was enough, okay? Like, it could have been worse. It could have been worse. Anyway, okay, what's this? Okay, yeah, so Jeff Bridges' performance towards the end, he was reminding me, funnily enough, because just recently on the Ace, we did Man Facing Southeast, which we obviously compared to K-Pax, which is a very similar premise, which does star Jeff Bridges. And there's a couple moments in this. Actually, no, what? No, I'm mixing my movies up. I wasn't thinking of K-Pax. So that segue where I just explained why I was thinking of K-Pax is irrelevant because I wasn't thinking of K-Pax.
Check out the Atomic Cinema Experiment, though, where we did Man Facing Southeast a while back.
This is the thing. I've also done this movie on the Ace just before your time. But I was thinking of Starman. There's a way that Jeff Bridges talks sometimes in Starman because he plays an alien in that movie. See, that was my confusion. In K-Pax, he's not the alien, he's the psychiatrist, right? But in Starman, he plays the alien. And he's got this way where he kind of like talks in the middle of his mouth where only the sort of like the inner lips move, but the sides are kind of staying more static. And he was kind of doing that towards the end of this movie. It was making me think Starman.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're talking about. Yeah. He does it when he's angry. Like he purses his lips, but he still has to say the words.
But his teeth are still pretty like closed almost. Yeah. So he's been very kind of. I can't even do it. I can't even begin to do an impression of it.
Yeah, but... no. I know what you're talking about though. I can recognize him doing it as like I'm picturing it in my head.
Yeah. Anyway, other thing. So I've got a 5.1 sound system for my TV, right? And I'm only bringing this up because the subwoofer was dead for like most of the movie, but when the storm hits, that subwoofer kicked into high gear and was just constantly rumbling everything for like a solid 15 minutes. It was It was something. It was. I just don't know if I've ever watched the movie before because obviously if you watch a comedy, there's like no sub action because there's no explosions, there's no big loud engines or anything like that. But I feel like, so typically if you're watching a movie that has that kind of thing, and you get pockets of it all throughout. This is probably the strictest example I can think of where it was dead the entire. I think it fluttered to life once early on when they first hit the water, and there was a little bit of emphasis on the crashing of the waves. Right. But after that, it was nothing until the squall hit, and then all of a sudden, like I thought I was going to get noise complaints from the neighbors. It was that loud. Wow.
I mean, that kind of makes me want to get like because I just watched this via headphones. I was watching on my computer, and I kind of would love to have that experience because it seems like it's much more immersive than what was presented.
Yeah, I got like a cheap 5.1 system back when I was a teenager when I had a DVD player back in the day. But like I actually still have the same sound system I bought in 2008, so it's going strong. Like it's 16 years old at this point.
As long as White Squall didn't blow it out, I guess.
Don't get me wrong. I'm constantly monitoring just like because I think when it eventually dies, or if I decide it's time to just move on to something new because it's been so long, I'll probably just get like a sound bar that comes with a couple of speakers for the back and a subwoofer. But I will say this. I need the subwoofer. The rumble, the cinematic feeling of that rumble kicking in when there's like a loud explosion or something. Once you're used to that, you need to have it. It's too good.
Yeah, that's fair. I've never been one as like an audio guy, but I experience when I get that in the theater, when I feel that deep like chest rumble, yes. I'm like, ooh, all right, yeah, that felt good.
Yeah, that's because I could probably go to like just a soundbar and a subwoofer. I wouldn't necessarily need the back speakers. I mean, if I might as well get them because why not? It's not that tough to do. But the rumble, you need the rumble of the bass, the subwoofer. Right. And this was the most excited I got in the whole movie, can you tell?
That's fair.
I was like, things are happening. There's rumbling going on.
Yeah, all right. I mean, do we just want to like try to hit like plot beats at a time, and then if anything interesting
Let's
comes
talk
up,
about Ryan Phillippe pissing himself.
All right. Well, hold on. Let's get them on the boat to start. How about that?
Okay.
like you said, we get the main character. He has to convince his dad, like, oh, I want to do this. It's going to be good for me, whatever. And he hops on a bus, heads down to the port. And on the way there, he meets a couple other kids who are doing it. And they start sharing stories
They're
because
doing what?
they've already done the... I don't even know what I said.
He said he meets another couple of kids who are doing it. And I'm like, wait, whoa.
Doing the school aspect.
I'm just saying, the phrasing was just really unfortunate.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm it's not even conscious anymore. Everything I say is just a double entendre. So no, they start sharing stories because they've all already been on this trip. They're coming back again. And as they are getting onto the ship, they meet up with all the crewmates, all the skippers, stuff like that. And they start like just fixing up the ship. That's the first thing they have to do. They fix up the ship.
I'll interject that they do give Jeff Bridges a bit of an entrance because, like, you know, all the people who have not been here before are like, oh, when are we going to meet the captain? Like, when's the skipper coming aboard? And someone like says something like jokingly about him, and Jeff Bridges kind of walks out, and like it's like kind of an awkward like moment, and then someone yells "Skipper on deck," and then they all just sort of like, oh, everyone straighten up.
Oh, it's him. But like they still don't understand just how like reverence to give him either. They're very much just punk kids at this point. So like they stand up and they like know they're supposed to pay attention, but they're still just kind of like joking around a little bit for a while. And then very first thing that happens as like a thing is that in order to get your first day's dinner or breakfast or whatever, you have to jump into the water. That's just a thing to do. So all the kids jump in except for one of them, who's the punk kid, I think named Dean. And they're just like, come on, Dean, you got to jump in. And he kind of baits the first mate, who is named Shay. He baits him saying like, oh, well, you didn't jump in. So Shay climbs up to like the second highest mast and he jumps off in this fancy dive. And then Dean, not wanting to be outdone, climbs up to the very highest mast and he does a fancy jump and he lands in the water. So that was an entire sequence to give character development, but honest to God, nothing else.
I mean, Dean, from the first second you meet him, is aggressive, and when someone implies that he's an idiot, even though it wasn't that harsh a statement, like, he just flies off the handle, and I'm like, okay, this is the asshole who, by the end of the movie, is going to be sticking up for everyone else. I can see what they're doing here. And they develop him throughout the movie, where you find out that the reason why he doesn't like being called stupid is because he actually thinks he's stupid, and he cheated his, like, test scores to get here, and he's cheating in the tests. But a couple of the guys like, no, we'll help you. We can show you what you're missing. You know, all we ask is you don't cheat, but we'll make sure you pass legit. Just you know, let us help. So.
If he gets caught cheating, he'll be thrown off the boat. And because by that point in the movie they're already like a team and a crew, and they want to work together. It's a nice camaraderie moment for sure. It really binds them all together here.
Yeah. But yes, so the one guy that didn't climb very high up though. Was Ryan Phillips' character, right? Because he, it turns out, is scared of heights, and it's when the captain's given orders for something, this or that.
Our main kid gets like strangled up in the ropes.
That's right. Yeah, the main kid gets strangled in the rope, so he's basically being hanged, right? He's sort of dangling from the rope, and Bridges is shouting, "No, get up there and help him!" Because Ryan Phillippe happens to be closest, but he freezes, so Jeff Bridges has to climb up and he gets him down, and it's a whole thing. But he's like, so in front of everyone, he's like, hey, why didn't you go up? Why did you freeze? And then someone else eventually blurts out, he's scared to climb. He's scared of heights. And he's like, is that true? And he looks at him, very intense. And like, you know, at this point, you know, I'm not sure, like, are we getting like a Whiplash type character here where he's going to be like a complete dick? Or is he more of a sort of firm but fair kind of guy who's just trying to like teach them the right, and that's more where it leans to. He's not J.K. Simmons and Whiplash, but he's like, hey, all right, we're going to deal with this right now. Climb. And he's like, no, climb right now. Come on, we'll do this now. Yep. So he climbs a couple of rungs of rope, right? He's on his way up, and he's like, he gets scared and he's clinging to the ropes. And Bridges is like, all right, fine, I'll do it with you. I'll do it as well. And he's on the other side, and he's just screaming in his face. So they go up a couple of rungs, as it were, and they scream in each other's face again. And he's like, oh, you like this? Do you hate this? Is this fun? And he's like yelling at him, and he keeps going up. And it gets to the point where he starts screaming out so loud that he's like, and then pisses himself, but you see piss just coming down his leg, and because he's quite high up, it kind of sprays a bit as well. It's kind
got
of
some wind going on there.
So Bridges is like, okay, that's enough for now. Let's go down.
I may have gone a bit too far in places, but we'll go ahead and ease it on back.
And he's like, okay, someone like give him a job that suits or works around his one negative here, right?
We'll eventually get him up there, but for now, he keeps on saying that everyone needs to know the strengths and weaknesses of everybody else, so that way, if there is some sort of emergency, they're not relying on him to do something that he's not able to do.
Yes.
So this was kind of just showing that of like, okay, your weakness is you can't go up high. So be it. We are at least all are aware of that now.
Yeah. And of course, he does go up high later on, and it's kind of like a big sort of symbolic moment because he's doing it out of camaraderie.
Yes.
So
can I, as long as we're talking about Ryan Felipe's character, can I just talk about how he's introduced?
Oh, you mean
movie?
the fact that he walks up, shakes the main guy's hand, and then says, "Hey, this is a photo of my brother. He's dead," and then just walks away? You mean that scene?
No, I don't need to talk about it anymore. That's pretty much it. It just sets him out to be the most awkward character in the movie, and I don't want to like say anything super negative here because spoiler, he's one of the ones who doesn't make it to the very end. It feels like such a weird way to represent the guy who didn't make it, Like they had to make the conscious choice that this is the awkward guy who pissed his pants, and like this is in loving memory of him. It strikes me as weird by the end.
I have to assume though that means all these negative qualities that it's showing us are just true, because I think they couldn't make this up if it wasn't true, because it would be disrespectful.
Right, and I get that, but it also comes from the aspect of even if it's true, do you have to show it? Like did you have to show that he pissed his pants climbing up the rungs of this ladder?
Yeah.
I feel like the answer to that is no.
But at the same time, though, that's what makes it mean something when he goes up there later by his choice, right?
Well, I mean, he could have just been scared. I think the extra act of pissing himself is a little bit of a cherry on top.
It really emphasizes how scared he was, to be fair.
True. Yeah, that is true.
So it's showing you how much he overcomes by going up there later. So I can see the argument for it.
Oh, I can see the argument as well. It just strikes me as weird that they did it. In the beginning, I was willing to accept it, but once the character doesn't make it to the end, it's like, oh, the awkward kid who pissed himself. Like, they make you endear to him by the end, but it strikes me as weird that they went through, like, so much of making him the wuss when we're supposed to care about him so much by the end. I don't know. It just struck me as strange. I see why they did it, though.
Yeah. One of them falls in early on as well, and they have to do, like, a sort of quick jump in and grab them.
Yeah.
This is where what's her name? Alice, the wife character, like jumps in because she's the doctor, and she brings him on board, and he kind of hugs her when he gets on board because he was so shit scared. And I really remember this because Jeff Bridges yells out, "Okay, leave my wife alone and go and get cleaned up," or something like that.
Yeah, no, there's like a strong wind or something. Someone just gets whipped off by a mast turning, and then it's just a quick little scene that's a rescue mission. It shows the older people working together to go rescue the kid because the other kids aren't trained enough to do that stuff yet. In fact, this is the first time that our main boy, Chuck, he takes the wheel of the ship, and he's like super happy about it. He's enjoying the...
Oh, he gets a taste for it, yeah. Because I mean,
of him, yeah.
Because after this is all over, after the sort of dangerous part's over and he's fine, Bridges comes back up to him and he's like, "You're enjoying this, right?" And he's like, "Yes, sir." So he looks all happy as he's steering the ship.
Yep. Before we set off on the road, actually, we do get our final joining member of the party, which we already mentioned before is Jeremy Sisto.
Yes. So his rich dad flies him in the private little plane and drops him off a day later than everyone else, and he's got like a preppy kind of, private school uniform on.
He's wearing like a blazer where everyone else is in a tank top.
So he looks really awkward. Clearly his parents are making him do this, but right away you get the vibe of this guy that he doesn't really respect that he's on this guy's boat. He's kind of in Jeff Bridges' face. He's like, "Take care of my boy," and he's like, "I take care of all of them." And like, yeah. So he's very clearly an asshole. And it sets up, okay, so this rich kid is going to be maybe out of place with the others. I mean, some of them also come from relatively well-off families, but He
Yeah.
clearly is more well off than anyone else. But he doesn't want to do certain things. He doesn't want to stay out in the rain at one point early on. He's a bit pampered, shall we say?
Absolutely. And I think it's actually Dean who says, like, I do what I want when I want, and nobody's going to tell me otherwise. But I think that Sisto's character is the one who more represents that, at least here at the beginning part of his arc. Of he knows that once this is all done, he can just go back and he'll have his parachute. Like, it doesn't matter because his dad's going to just totally fix everything for him. The only reason he's here is because his mom wanted him to go on it. So, yeah, he's fine. He knows he doesn't have to work hard here.
Yeah, but of course they're very different though, because I think Dean's more about someone who's saying that because they want to show they're tough, whereas this is just a rich kid who just doesn't feel like he has to do anything. He doesn't want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean that's fine enough. I think his character obviously sticks out as maybe having the most plot in some ways because he shows some early signs early on where he has conflict with some of the others, particularly Dean. He gets into a fight with him at one point. He also has this one little moment where they're all just doing stuff on the deck, and he just notices the harpoon is sitting there, and he picks it up and he's just sort of aiming it, and he pretends that he's aiming it at one of the other guys, and just sort of just makes a little noise as if he's pretending that he shot it, and it's just a little hint for later. And obviously, before the next time he has the harpoon gun, there's a lot of stuff where his parents show up when they're at dock somewhere. They've actually flew to this other country in South America to come and check up on him. So, and at that point, he's kind of bonded with the crew a bit. But instead of hanging out with the other guys who are actually all with a bunch of girls at that point, we'll get to why later. But he's having dinner with his parents and doesn't want to be there with them. Now he feels like he's been forced to not be one of the guys. He's feeling like he's the estranged one now, and he has this confrontation with his father where when he speaks back to his father, it makes it clear that he wants to be sort of left on his own a bit. His father gets into this awkward tackling match with him and how dare you speak to me like that, and it never quite becomes a punch throwing fight, but it's definitely a fight. It's definitely
it's 5 seconds away. It's one wrong line away from a punch.
I honestly thought he was going to punch his dad. I thought as soon as he got out, I thought he was going to swing for him.
Yeah, same. I thought that was going to be the development moving forward is okay, he found his tribe with these other kids. He's enjoying himself here. But that golden parachute he had from his dad, he put that in jeopardy by throwing a punch and going against him here. It doesn't end up being that, but that's where I thought we were going with it.
Yeah, he ends up sort of acting drunk and foolish the rest of that night and causing a chaos, and it kind of everyone else basically has to drop their good night to come and deal with him because he's acting out and he's smashing tables and whatnot. So the next time he's on deck and this harpoon gun's there, it's when they're all excited because there's dolphins right next to the boat, and they're all excited. One of the guys gets out in the little swing and he's petting the dolphin. I'm oh, it's all very sweet. And Jeremy Sisto, the prick, picks up the harpoon gun and just shoots a dolphin because he wants to, because he's got this rage in him, obviously stemming from how he feels trapped by his father and everything else. I think I did kind of appreciate this sequence and the follow-up a little bit, just because I liked how it handled it in two different ways. One, I liked that everyone just knew it was him immediately. No one
oh yeah,
it was obvious someone shot with a harpoon. Everyone knew it was him. So when they bring the dolphin on board and they try and see if they can help it, and no, it's pierced its lung. There's nothing we can do. Jeff Bridges is all right, come here and put it out of its misery. Then you did this. You already killed it. Finish it. And he gives him a big mallet, and he's like, I can't do that. I can't do that. So he's learning a very valuable lesson here by not being able to go through with that.
I love the line is it's still struggling. It's bleeding out very slowly. And Jeremy Sistos just basically says I'm not going to kill it. And Jeff Bridges says, you already did. Now you're just going to follow through. Yeah.
So I liked more or less how that scene was handled, because it did feel like the dolphin looked good. Whatever if this was a puppet or whatever it was, it looked good.
Now they just went out to international waters and broke a lot of filming laws.
But I also liked that it had consequences, because immediately Jeff Bridges is you're off this ship. As soon as we dock, you're going home. And I'm like, yeah, this should have consequences. This was unhinged. And well, almost to the point where I didn't even want to side with the others when they were all arguing that they should like keep him, because two of them go to the captain and try and plead his case and say no, like he can do better, like we can be there for him, like whatever. Like I get what that's supposed to make me feel, but part of me was like, nah, he did just kill an innocent dolphin for no reason. That is actually kind of psychotic. Like we should maybe therapy would be a good start, I think, for this kid.
See, that's why I like how the scene evolved. Like in this first part, I was getting kind of frustrated with the kids because they're like, look, it's his dad. His dad's causing all this rage stuff, and the skipper is just like, too bad. I can't have that on the ship. I can't have like someone who goes psycho like that on our ship. That's not how this works. But I like how by the end of it, the plot feels like it's going to do a turnabout. It's going to do a thing where he earns his place back and he gets back on the ship and everything's going to be fine. But it doesn't. It does keep him off. It does send him back home. And that within itself has consequences for later on down the movie. But I like the fact that it pivoted away from, as saccharine as it feels, the clear, like, good feeling moment was actually not delivered upon. They took him off the ship and they kept him away.
There's a moment where Bridges is like walking him off the ship to the car where his rich parents are sitting in, presumably. And this is when Ryan Phillippe's character climbs the mast and goes right all the way up to the top and rings the bell and yells goodbye. And I almost, like, I genuinely thought that when he got to the top of that mast and he rang the bell, it was going to inspire the captain to see how much they were looking out for each other and turn and say, you know what? You can come back to the ship. But he didn't. Like, he let the moment play out. It was a sweet moment that they made that gesture for him, right? And the fact that the guy who's scared of heights did that, nice. Yeah. But you're still gone. Like, this was a line you crossed that cannot be uncrossed. And I still think it was the right choice. And I think it's good that it had some weight to it because they didn't chicken out of it. So I appreciate that. And obviously it's not the last we see of him. He does pop back up at the end after all the boat stuff's done. But that's kind of his time for now, at least in the movie.
Yep. So just a few things that we brushed over briefly is at one point in the night, Ryan Felipe wakes up, has a nightmare, and we get the explanation that the reason he's afraid of heights is because his brother who died, here's a photo of him. He died because he got in an argument with his family or something and fell out of a tree.
David, it's literally the meme of Wolverine looking at the photo in the bed.
It is.
It's literally that.
It is. I wish you didn't point that out because I'm looking at the scene now and I'm like, oh no, it's the same moment. But yeah, no, he fell out of a tree and he, broke his neck or whatever. He ended up dying. So that's why he's afraid of heights. And then the other thing that happens immediately following this is they get a shore leave. They manage to go into town and we get two different sequences. The first of which is they try to get some money together to get Ryan Felipe laid. And then they decide, all right, well, maybe if it's not Ryan, it should be one of us just picked randomly. And they spin a bottle to pick who it is. And they fix it so that it ends up being Jeremy Sisto who goes to get laid. And then it's a whole comedic beat where he thinks he's paying for one woman to have sex with him. Turns out it's this completely other woman who's much older and much bigger. And he runs out of there and they all have a laugh. And the only thing I could think of for this whole sequence is they are 15 to 16. And they are just having this as a laugh. They are just like, let's just go down to prostitution. Why not? We're barely old enough to drive, but let's just go ahead and get ourselves a hooker. And I understand the fact that it's a different time, but I don't feel like it was that different of a time.
I mean, I buy that 15-year-olds went to prostitutes and probably still do in some parts of the world, right? I don't think that's unfathomable to think. I actually thought the punchline here is that it's not actually a brothel and that this woman was here to do something else, but he ran away before we even get a chance to get that punchline. So I don't know if that was the case or not. But either way, yeah, I mean, it is what it is as far as a joke and bonding moment goes. The other big thing that happens here is that they're told to be back by a certain time and they're late. So Bridges is actually taking the boat out, so they see it in the water and they all start panicking because, oh shit, we've been abandoned here now. Oh no. but obviously he comes back the next day and gives them a whole speech about how, you know, this is your one chance, like, you know, you're all back on the ship, but that's it.
Responsibility, blah blah blah. Don't do it again.
Yes. So
this is also where we get the mention of how, like, next week or something like that, there's going to be a bunch of school kids that they have to look after on a day out at sea. Students specifically.
Never, of course, mentioning that it's going to be all girls, which gets all the boys excited when they see all the girls waving at the docks, and they all get, I mean, most of them get nervous and start worrying. And we also find out that most of these girls can't speak a word of English. Not that stops some of them from hooking up and at least starting to have sex. I mean, obviously the guy with the glasses does have sex because, as he puts it later, he's pissing fire. Smash cut to him with his trousers down, and the doctor lady being like, "Have a good time at port, did you?"
I like that sequence because the glasses kid is like, earlier on he says like, "Oh yeah, one time I was just peeking around because, you know, I'm the perverted one, and I got to see the captain's wife topless, and like that's where the quote came from, Boner City, fellas." But I like the fact that
did you feel old when he said she's over 30, but it's still Boner City, bro?
Bro,
over 30. He sees that as like ancient.
I immediately put that kid on my shit list. I immediately was like, well, if you die in this, I'm not going to feel so bad. Because that's just, how dare you?
I can't fathom having that. Like, at 15, there were women in their 40s that I was insanely attracted to. The idea of thinking that someone over 30, it was like, oh no, it's very unlikely I'd be attracted to anyone over 30 just because I happen to be 15. No. Yep. Did these kids not like MILFs in the 60s? Was that not a thing?
Nope, not at all.
Anyway.
That developed in 1964.
Are you trying to hit the release date of The Graduate? Because I feel like you are.
I would be, if I actually hit that, I'm super happy. Is that actually what it came out?
I don't know if it's that year, but it's around that, vaguely around that time.
Graduate. Hold on. No, not like in general, the movie. 67. Damn. Just off. Close. All right, fine. That's when it happened. That's when MILFs became a thing. 1967.
Not by name, of course. That came much later.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, after that point, like you said, there was the whole bit of like his Jeremy Sisto's parents coming in, blah blah blah. He gets into a drunken rage and just starts beating everything up until they drag him back to the ship, and whatever. It's everything you described there with the dolphin and all that happening.
Yeah, we already kind of got past all that stuff.
Yep.
The only thing I'll add on to Ryan Phillippe's character stuff is that he specifically opens up about how him and his brother would hide from their parents when they fight because their parents fight all the time. And he reveals, I think after the nightmare maybe it is, where his brother fell out the tree because he was in the tree hiding from his parents, and because he was away doing a school thing or something, he wasn't there to be with his brother. So the question comes up, did you ever tell your parents why he was in the tree? And he admits that he hasn't, because how could he? So his parents will never know that their fighting kind of led to their own kid's death, kind of thing.
Right.
So, but obviously that character does die before the end of the movie. So, unless like the main guy, like he's like, I'm going to phone their parents just to let them know.
I fully would love to. I actually was kind of hoping, because at the very end we get to see the kids like all coming in, and you see the parents that are left over, the ones who are just left standing there, and you get the feeling that, you know, they weren't told that their kids died or whatever. This is how they found out. I was kind of waiting for the moment where our main boy comes up and talks to Ryan Phillippe's mom, and it's just like, I'm so sorry, you know, he didn't make it, da-da-da, and just kind of like bonds with her a little bit on that level. He of course doesn't. But now that you're saying that, I also kind of wish that he would have come up being like, I'm sorry he didn't make it, and by the way, you're the reason that your sons are dead.
Yes. Well, one was hiding in a tree, the other one ran to this, like, go and do this boat school thing.
Yep, just to get away from you.
Yes. And not only that, he kind of dies later on because he goes back to get the photograph of his brother, which is what dooms him ultimately to his death. So all of it comes back to his parents fighting.
Don't fight in front of your kids, everybody. That's the moral of the story.
Yes. So, I mean, basically from this point on, like, we're kind of at the point where they go to, like, the What?
Yeah,
Where'd he go? What is it?
I know what you're talking about. The Cuban ship coming in. That's the
Oh,
one
okay.
big thing that happens in the middle here.
I'll be honest, I would have completely forgotten to talk about that if you'd not brought it up.
It has nothing to do with the story, and it's only just to keep it set during the Cuban Missile Crisis and add a little bit of tension. But like, it is a moment where I felt there was the most tension outside of the storm. Everything else was
Well,
just
no,
kind of like character development. This was actually like consequences.
well, yeah, but no, I mean, there is a purpose to it, though, beyond what you just said. The purpose is that Jeff Bridges is going to stick up for the kids and kind of put his life in the line and say, no, no one's leaving my boat. Like, you know,
Right.
the idea that it builds the camaraderie even further. And this moment arguably might be the moment that makes them all loyal to him until, you know, death for some of them, and for some, you know, others
Yeah.
past the squall. So it does have a purpose.
It also very purposely comes after the dismissal of Jeremy Sisto, where they're looking at him saying, like, you got rid of one of our crewmates. You're acting just like all of our fathers that we all hate. And therefore, how can we really trust you? So putting this sequence after there, like you said, reestablishes that trust. It gets them back on his side there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, it's the whole thing where the boat comes up and they come on board and they want to see passports.
They fire a cannon. The ship, they just see this random shooter out in the masts and everything like that, and this military ship fires a cannon at it.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning the boat they're on, right, the Albatross, it's not like a new fancy ship for 1961. It's an old sail ship, right?
Yeah.
It goes back. I think the Wikipedia said it was from 1920. So,
Okay.
So they board the ship. They want to see passports, and the two key things of tension is one, that the cook is actually a Cuban national, but is pretending to be Puerto Rican for the sake of this because he doesn't want to get taken by the military here. And two, one of the teenagers can't find his passport. So they're like, oh, we're going to have to take him then. I'm like, I'm pretty sure this kid is as equally American as all these other dumb teenagers. What are you talking about?
I really wanted, as much as this didn't do anything like specifically about race, I really wanted one of them to point out, like, does he look Cuban to you at all? Like, at all? He's the blondest kid here.
No, I get that this guy, this Cuban officer, whoever he is, I get that he knows, obviously, that this kid isn't Cuban. He's just throwing his weight around because on a technicality, he can do this. Obviously, Jeff Bridges is arguing that he's breaking a bunch of laws here, be even firing on them by coming on board the ship, all the rest of it. But the cavalry's on the way, because as soon as they saw the ship, they called out to the Coast Guard, so there's some other boats coming, and it kind of forces the Cubans to leave the boat. And, you know, so it's like, okay, right, that's that done. Although, just to be petty, on his way off the boat, the Cuban guy smashes the big compass that's next to the wheel. So, which is what prompts Jeff Bridges to walk over and, in Spanish, tell him that a real sailor just needs the stars.
And then that's it.
That's it.
Cubans just go off, and they now are re-inspired by Jeff Bridges saying, oh man, he risked his life for us. We should do the same for him.
So anyway, the final goal, the final destination, they get to it, and it's, you know, it's a very, you know, just tropical place. There's no civilization, and all the boys go running out, just celebrating the open space. But they've got a goal in mind, because there's like a capsule, I guess we'll call it, which has got like a logbook in it, and the idea is that all these different, presumably the Albatross, if not other boats, all come, like, obviously the maritime community keeps track of these types of things. So anyone who comes here goes to this logbook, pulls it out from under this rock, and they'll sign it and say which boat they were on, and like they all sign their names, and they sort of look through some of the pages, and it's like, oh, here's someone from the 20s and 30s, and it's like, okay, yeah, it's all right. So they're taking their place in the next part of history. This is now their era, and this is them kind of cementing that.
And I like that idea, and I like the way the sequence plays out. I just wish it didn't have that narration over top of it, because the entire time we're doing these grand vista shots, and the narration's just like, we entered this island as boys, but much like people before us. It's like, shut up, man. Just let the visuals be.
Yeah, it's just overly sentimental crap. The narration, it really is. So Jeff Bridges and the missus get it on the boat whilst it's empty, so they have a bit of fun. And then for some reason, when the boys all come back, they're all pretending to be Native Americans, and it's not really mentioned, and it's gone immediately, because as soon as they go back to the boats, they just cuts the time later, and it's already over. But just mentioning it because it caught me off guard.
Yeah, nah, it was weird. They come in doing like the war cries and stuff like that, and I'm like, are we setting up like a native population story? Is that what we're doing here? And
Well,
then no, it's just the boys running in.
this is 90 minutes into the movie, David, and I'm thinking, where the hell's my disaster? That's what I was thinking at this point. Luckily, though, because so they make a point saying this was their furthest destination, and now they're on their way back, because they even talk a little bit about how it feels different being on the way back now. I don't want this to end. Now that we've become a crew, this is my life now. I don't want to go back to normality. So, of course, ultimately, do you know what the funny thing is I think the direction starts getting good right about here. Not that it was bad before. I don't mean to say that, but what I mean is that the way it filmed the build up to the squall hitting felt different. It felt like the direction was also telling you something's about to happen. Like the way it was just sort of focusing on them getting their breakfast and they're kind of tilting to one side and like they're being casual. Even Jeff Bridges isn't that worried because the whole point of a white squall, is that it can come out of nowhere. There's no warning. That's what makes it so dangerous. It's like a phenomena. So. Like, just the way... If this was the first time in the whole movie, actually, it almost felt like the start of Volcano when it's, like, cutting around the city and, something's bubbling. Something's about to happen. That's what this little couple minutes felt like. And then, of course, the weather starts hitting.
Yeah, there's a radio broadcast going on where I guess it's whatever astronaut going up into space around this time. And they're doing, like, a countdown. They're saying, like, 90 seconds to liftoff, 60 seconds to liftoff. And it gives you this feeling, like you said, something's going to happen. Even though the broadcast is talking about the space liftoff, clearly this is referencing something else is going to happen.
I do like the idea, though, that sailors, maybe more than anyone else, would like appreciate like the space race, like the idea that they're sailing into this like new sea that we could only dream of doing because we're people of the water. I don't know, just thought,
that's the whole thing. I think is that astronauts, I could be mistaken here, but I believe they use naval ranks for like astronauts and stuff like that because it is very much like, you're going out into this environment where death is around you all the time and the only thing keeping you alive is your ship. So I think that they do use naval stuff for that.
Well, that's the reason why you have to be so disciplined on a ship. It's even more tenfold when you're in space because if you fall in the water, you might be able to get back on the ship. You fall out the spaceship. Things ain't going to be so nice. So,
and if you shoot a space dolphin, you're immediately ejected.
Yes. So I mean, I think that little comparison is nice, especially since we're in the early 60s. We're at the first like trips to space in general. Never mind, we're not even getting to the moon till 69. So we're in the early days here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's fine. But anyway, the actual disaster hits, and this stuff looks good, right? It looks good. It sounds good. There's a lot of flipping. That said, though, let's get to the part that made me laugh, which is the first part didn't make me laugh. The first part's fine. When the first big wave hits, right, and there's a little moment where Jeff Bridges looks up and goes, "White Squall," and the water hits, right? Right. So the wife's in like her little like cot area and whatever, and she gets thrown back, and the back of her head hits the sort of the bunk bed, right? And it's
very
like,
clearly shown,
right? And I'm like, oh damn, that must have hurt. She's maybe unconscious. That could be dangerous. So more stuff happens, right? The ship's capsizing. There's water spraying everywhere. After like a couple of minutes of just chaos around the ship, cuts back to her, and she's slowly starting to get up. She's coming to, right? She's waking up, and then the ship jolts forward, and she goes flying forward and hits the front of her head on the cabinet in front of her, and seemingly gets knocked out again. And I burst out laughing. And I felt bad afterwards because she ends up in one of the people who dies. She never gets out of this room. Like she's clearly waking up before she dies, which is a shame. But she never gets out of this room. And I'm like, movie, you made me laugh about what just happened to her, and then you hit me like a minute later with, oh, by the way, she also died from this and she was a real person, so feel bad, you piece of shit.
Again, I feel like it's the same sort of thing I'm talking about with Ryan Felipe pissing his pants, though, where it's, you had her hitting her head. That's enough. You don't have to add the second hit in there. It just feels like slapstick at that point.
Yes, it felt slapstick.
It's too much. Yeah.
Absolutely, it felt slapstick.
Add on top of it, they keep on intercutting to Ryan Felipe, who, as we said, is another one who doesn't make it. he, despite this ship turning like 90 degrees sideways, is just fast asleep in his bed. He doesn't wake up during any of this,
Yeah,
which also gives it a weirdly comedic tint.
Yeah, he does this sliding down the bed thing when it like goes to the angle, and then it goes back again, so he slides back, and then he slides back down again.
Meanwhile, everyone else is panicking. They're shouting, they're screaming out, "Skipper, what do we do?" All this stuff. But we just have these two people, the two people who die in this, and there's, I think, one or two more, but it's so weird to me how comedic these scenes are shot for such a hardcore tension moment.
Yeah, the cook dies, and then I think 2 or 3 other students die.
I think Dean dies in this. I think the rest of the students are okay, but that was just because they trimmed down the number of deaths, because there were actually like 9 students total in the original, like what actually happened, and they trimmed it down to 7 for this.
Oh, sure. But there was definitely at least 3 student names in the dedication at the end.
Right. That's what I'm saying, is that there were more there, but in terms of the cast that we see, it was the wife, the cook, and the...
and 3 students.
2 students. That's what I'm saying. One of the students didn't, because they weren't actually in the movie at all. The dedication just, they merged characters together.
David, we've established repeatedly that I couldn't tell them apart for the most part, and that half of them just blend into the background. So I can't remember how many there were in the movie. I remember how many names I saw at the end. So that's what I'm quoting.
I understand. And that's why I'm clarifying that the movie just omitted 2 students that actually existed. They were not in the movie at all. So only 2 students ended up dying on camera.
So he mentions them in the narration, though. I'm sure he does. Like, he mentions like 3 names. I'm sure he does in the narration.
He says the wife, Ryan Felipe, Dean, who's the other one who dies, and the cook. Those were all the names he said.
I think Glasses guy dies as well. He's the one that gets tangled in the ropes under the water.
No, Glasses guy is at the final trial.
Is he?
He's the one who's doing the whole thing.
Well, whatever. But someone gets tangled in the ropes under the water.
That was Dean. Dean died in the ropes.
I thought he was
Punk Kid. That was Angry Kid.
I thought he was in the court at the end.
Nope, he was not.
Like, I'm just making my point here that I couldn't tell half of them apart.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wholesale, like, I'm watching this, and the problem is when they die, they're all soaking wet. Some of them are like underwater. It's very hard to tell because their hairstyles are all different. They're shot in a different way because they're underwater. It makes it very difficult to tell who is actually there and who's not.
They're also all wearing white t-shirts, which also doesn't help differentiate it very much. Regardless,
there's no difference.
Yeah, there's a whole bit here where Jeff Bridges realizes he can't see his wife, so he goes looking for her, and he sees her through like the window in the deck, and he starts like trying to open it, and he starts like taking an axe to it, and it's actually the English teacher who eventually says, "Dude, we need to go. Like, it's over. Like, the ship's gone. It's going. We have to leave." So, you know, when we get to the bit after everything's finally over and they're on the 2 little lifeboats, and like he just starts crying. Like, you know, Jeff Bridges is crying at the tip of the boat. You know,
and then the other half of it is Ryan Felipe, because he was asleep. He doesn't get out in time. He goes back for his brother's picture, whatnot. When Chuck, our main character, goes back down trying to find Ryan Felipe, he finds him and he's stuck behind a door. There's an object in the way that's like too heavy to move it. And he basically just has to turn back around and let Ryan Felipe die. He just has to live with that on his conscience, that he was right there, like inches away, but he was unable to move the door open.
They do the whole, like, both have their hands against the glass moment, which felt a bit cheesy in the moment for me, but...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a point, they're screaming, and then, like, in the final moments, he, like, speaks very softly, and he's like, "You need to push open the door, Ryan Felipe." And then he just can't.
Yeah, so this is one of the things where if the movie was going to focus more on the survival element, like spending more time with them not knowing if they'll ever get found on the lifeboats afterwards would have been maybe a little interesting. But of course, it literally just cuts to like the next day or however long it's been, and within seconds, oh, there's a boat in the distance, shoot the flare, and that's it. You know, it's treated as like we have to show this step because this is how they get found. But we are not drawing drama or any tension from the idea that they also spent like time afterwards terrified that this is it. They're just going to float until they die of starvation or whatever else.
Yeah. And again, that's just the story of how they wanted to tell their story. They wanted it to be about the camaraderie. They wanted it to be about this group that came together. The trial afterwards does much more for that story than them being in the lifeboats probably did it all. So they just glossed over it
Well,
and said, yeah, they got found pretty quick, whatever.
Which is fine. Like they picked their focus. That's fine. But I'm saying I felt it was a disservice because I found, wait, they're already picked up. I feel like we just skipped over like a lot of time that was probably terrifying for them.
Yeah,
but
let's drop the storyline where they try to hire a hooker and put in a scene where they're in the lifeboats for a while. I'm all right with that.
Dear, yeah. So as you kind of alluded to earlier, there's a scene where like they're taken to where all the parents are waiting for them, and some of them are scared that they're not going to see their kids. But then, of course, like the main kid's dad finally sees them and he's all relieved. But then there are parents who are left standing there after everyone else has left, and just it's dawning on them, oh no, my kid's one of the ones that didn't make it, and that's like a, it's a heartfelt moment for them. But the plot of the rest of the movie, which is not a lot left, but the plot that's left is that, there's this tribunal to take away his license and blaming the captain for this happening, that it's his decisions that caused this. And all the boys are like, F that's not fair. They're trying to make it simple by blaming it on one person because that's easy, it's neat. They don't have to, they can have a culprit, which means the people who lost someone can blame someone and therefore make them feel better, as much as that's unhealthy. And they also find out that Jeremy Sisto's dad is spearheading this. Like, he's like basically got a vendetta because his kid got kicked out of this boat. So he's like the one there in town. So the main kid tries to go and talk to Jeremy Sisto about it and sort of say, hey, is your dad the one doing this? And it's a bit of a cold exchange. It's not like, even though there was a bit of like a camaraderie as he was leaving and they had the big gesture where they said goodbye, it feels like it's went a bit cold again. Like, he spent some time with his parents and he's kind of trapped with them effectively. So he's sort of like not rocking that boat, pardon the pun. But when we get into the hearing and they're questioning Jeff Bridges, and Jeff Bridges is being honest, like, whenever they say anything that sounds like it might sound bad, he admits that he did it. Like, he challenged Jeremy Sisto to punch him after the dolphin thing. He's like, hey, if you've got anger you want to take out, then go on, do it. Take a hit.
Skipper, is it true that you pushed Ryan Felipe up a rope bridge until he pissed his pants? Just want to bring that up again. Just want to make that for the record. Did he piss his pants?
Amazingly, they never brought that one up.
They did. They absolutely did. Yeah. They said, like, you pushed him up there despite the fact that he was acrophobic. Maybe they didn't say pissed his pants.
No, that's what I meant. They never bring up him pissing himself, which is what I meant. So they bring him up, pushing him up the ropes. But so it's all playing out, and it gets to the point where the prosecutor, if you will, starts saying, hey, this looks like you were being reckless, that you were making bad decisions, and you were not fit to lead these boys. And I mean, you were trusting them to like run the ship for you. They're just boys, and that's what pisses off Jeff Bridges. Like, no, they're more than just boys. And you can see like the boys in the audience all sort of smiling, like, yeah, he's still our captain. He's still our captain, damn it. So
there's one weird thing in this exchange that I didn't feel like the movie set up at all, which is apparently a white squall is like a thing that never happens. It's like a complete fairy tale to these people. Like, they're like, a white squall? Seriously? Why not just say you fought a tidal wave, bro? Like, that doesn't happen. But that it's like a point in court that they bring this up and say how rare white squalls are, to the point where they're like, forgetting the fact that any sort of storm, it should have been the exact same thing. They really make a point of saying that because it's a white squall, you could not have been expected to deal with it. But if it wasn't a white squall, well then, yeah, you should have been totally fine to handle whatever that was.
Yeah. I don't know what point you just made, but just to sort of spin off of it.
Yes.
To spin off of it, I think, in 1961, clearly it was not believed to necessarily be a true thing. It was seen as like, some people thought it was a myth. I think when I looked it up in Wikipedia to see, like, is it still a myth? There was a photograph of one happening in like 2009. I'm like, okay, so clearly we just know it happens now. Like, white squalls do exist, and it's just maybe the scientific equipment wasn't there yet to just capture it. From, I assume satellites have made it a lot easier to confirm such a thing when it happens.
Oh yeah, sudden windstorms. I'm sure they get all that. The point I was trying to make at it though is, like, in a movie like Volcano or something like that, they had the sequences where characters were like, a volcano in Los Angeles? You're insane. And then, like, it happens. There was no point in this movie where I was ever feeling like a white squall is not something that's usual. And more importantly, why it's so much worse than any other
David,
type of storm.
honestly, I think it's more than that. It's not even just that you don't think it's usual. Until the moment where he says White Squall before it hits the ship, I don't believe that it's ever brought up once. No one ever talks about waves, never mind, you know, a white squall or a regular squall or, you know, but it just kind of, and I don't necessarily hate that because, and like, it would be a little bit forced and foreshadowing if there's that typical movie scene, like, you know, in the first act where someone brings up, oh, the legend of the White Squall. It's like, you know, when there's a sudden storm and it causes a wave that you couldn't have predicted. You know, because a sailor, you have to predict a lot of things with the weather, and that's how you keep your boat safe, and that's how you make the right choices to keep the easy to sail through. You know when to anchor, you know when to be moving, so on, so on. The idea is the White Squall can catch you completely off guard, and that's what happened here. But no one's believing him. This must be your fault. You must have made bad decisions. And Jeff Bridges gets upset. He pulls out his license. He just slaps it on the table and says, "This end this circus, right? I'm done." And this is where our main kid, Chuck.
We made it to the end of the review, and you're like, Jimmy?
Chuck stands up in front of him, in front of everyone, and is like, "No, Skipper, you won't walk out. We're still here for you, so you be here for us. You don't let them take your license." I can't even remember what he said, but it was something along those lines.
He stands up and he says, "Oh, Captain, my captain," basically. That's exactly what the scene is.
And then after he's made enough of a speech, and it still looks like Jeff Bridges is going to walk, Jeremy Sisto got a hold of the bell from the shipwreck, right? One of them had it with them because it was Chuck who gave it to him actually in the scene where Rick was speak to him. He gave him it was wrapped
He's like,
up.
"You're still a member of the team, even if you weren't there, and here's your prize for doing that." So
he stands up and rings the bell, right? And that inspires the captain to turn around. All of the boys get up and go and hug him, give him a big group hug. So all these parents are forced to watch all these boys hug him and see that, no, they respect him, they trust him, they have built a camaraderie. So regardless of what's happened, they clearly don't see him as being at fault. Because I think at one point, the glasses kid, he says something that's a lie to try and make it look like it was his fault, that they didn't steer the boat correctly or whatever. And Jeff Bridges stands up and says, "I'm not letting a 17-year-old take the... I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you're not taking the fall for this, right? This was my responsibility, as was everyone on that boat." So
yeah, he was the one who was up on the wheel during like the squall, and Jeff Bridges told him like, "Turn this direction," and he was like, "That's not what you trained us to do. You said to do this stuff." But he was giving orders, and then Glasses Kid just directly ignored them, which then he's going to try to spin that to save Jeff Bridges's captain's license or whatever, by saying like, "No, it was me. I panicked. I'm responsible for it." But yeah, Jeff Bridges just says like, "Screw that. I'm in charge of you kids. You couldn't be expected to know that."
Yeah. So I mean, then the narration comes in after the big group hug and says they didn't take his license that day, but we all wondered, would he ever sail again? Would he ever go back on the sea?
But if he did, we'd be right there with him.
Because we're men. He made us men, and we're men together. Damn it.
And I really want to get back down to Granada to meet up with some more hookers down there. The end.
And as the credits play, is it like a new group going to that capsule?
No, it was just
the same group?
reusing the footage. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The credits just play over it. There was a quick thing saying, "Oh, yeah, the captain became part of the Peace Corps or something a few years later."
Yeah, captain became part of the Peace Corps, and then Glasses Kid and our main character went to Vietnam and came back fine.
I love how they felt the need to put that, like, they could have just said they went to go fight in Vietnam. They had to put on, and they came back okay, because we might all assume that they died in Vietnam.
I mean, I feel like that's the sort of thing where if any of them died in Vietnam, they would specifically put that, just to get that extra little heart wrench out in the end.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like... I mean, the action scene of the wave and like the capsizing is handled well, right? There's a couple of little touches here or there that I like from Ridley Scott and his direction, But for the most part, this is a very by the numbers movie. I think once you hear a couple of lines of narration, you know exactly the tone this is going for. You know exactly some of the beats it's going to have where they bond over the course of the movie. And I don't think it's does anything to make it feel special as the type of movie that it is by the end. You know, Jeff Bridges obviously is the best part. I think that would probably be fair to say for the film.
Yeah, no, I mean, he definitely has the most, I don't want to say character because obviously everyone gets like their own little stuff going on, but he's the one who feels the most capable in portraying that character. As much as the other characters are, you know, Ryan Felipe's got his own fears and stuff going on. It does feel a little bit almost cartoonish in a way of how just over the top they go. Jeff Bridges is the only one who feels like he has a complex character with like complicated motivations and stuff the whole way through.
I think a lot of the kids come across a little too cartoonish for me. You know, like Dean is just such a stereotypical bad boy with the slick back hair, and you know, no one tells me what to do. You know, the cowardly character who needs help with talking to women, or
he finds his bravery by the end. And the rich kid who never cared about anybody finds something to care about. If anything, the major disservice here is the character of Chuck, the main boy who we follow the narration of, because he doesn't do anything. He doesn't change at all. He just continues to be.
And I'll be honest, I watched the first like half hour of this movie like earlier today, and then I was like, I can't watch this just now. I'll come back when I have to watch the rest of it.
Yeah.
And when I came back, I swear it took me half an hour to realize which one of them was the narrator kid. I didn't know which one it was. I genuinely struggled. So
that's fair. I mean, I guess that's almost on the level of, you know, they want to do like an ensemble cast sort of thing, but they have to give focus to the guy who wrote the book because he wrote the book. Like, he is the narrator in this story.
Yeah, it's funny how in a lot of ways, I mean, they give him a little bit, like, obviously his dad didn't want him to come and he wants to be here and all that, but he probably has the least conflict with his, like, personal life. So, and is that because he had the least conflict, or just because he didn't want to admit to, like, how bad things were when he was writing these books? Like, everyone else has got a tragic story. I'll have an slightly sad story.
There was a line that he said there. So one of the things is that I think they have to take their SATs. That's like the test that they're studying for. And they all get their tests back. And wouldn't you know it, the dumb kid who's got like a chip on his shoulder, he did fine. He passed with colors because they all banded together. But Chuck says the line specifically of like, you know, I've been acing tests all my life and I don't know who I am. I'm like, wow, you're just going to throw that in about yourself there, huh? You're just going to say how smart you were all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, SATs are a country-specific thing, so yes. I assume 1100's a great score because they're very happy with it, but I don't know what 1100 means.
Yeah, I think the max back then was, God, what was it? It was 1800. 1100 was still like decent enough to pass, though. And considering the kid started the movie with not being able to spell, I'm going to give him credit for being able to pass.
Yes, that's fair.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're ready to rate White Squall.
Yeah, I guess. I didn't go into this with the expectation of loving it. I guess I kind of wanted it to just be the stereotypical disaster movie formula. Even if it wasn't great, at least I would be getting the formula out of it.
I never thought it was going to be that, to be fair, just because it did look like a different type of movie. But I thought it was going to be a lot more focused on the survival at sea, and like I thought the disaster would be hitting like the end of Act 1, start of Act 2, and then Act 2 is the disaster itself. Act 3 is like the sort of the comeback. And had I known there was going to be a hearing, maybe some of that, like a lot of Act 3 might have been that. But instead, it's 90 minutes of just the coming of age stuff, and then there's a disaster to sort of like punctuate it at the end.
Right. And that's where, looking at it, I like the coming of age stuff. Not in that I like how this movie did it, but like I can see how the coming of age story can hit someone really specifically. I think if you were in this sort of age group of like 15, 16, like white kid who doesn't have any actual problems in their life, but still feels angsty and wants to like find out their true purpose, this movie would definitely hit you in a specific way. I absolutely understand that. But me looking back on it on the ancient age of 30, who can definitely not be hot anymore, it just doesn't feel like it offers anything that's all that special or all that meaningful in like a cinematic sense. It just feels like a bare bones coming of age story where all of a sudden at the end God wants them dead. And honestly, he misses most of it. So all in all, I think ratings wise, I would come down at probably like I'd say a 6. It seems, harmless in the most broad sense, but when it comes down to it, I'm not eager to check this back out again. It's a finely made movie in terms of cinematography and effects, but like I'm just not interested in it. It's this greatest story for somebody, just not me.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to come across sounding harsher than I should be here, but to me, I came out of this thinking it's a 5. And
That's fine.
on a technical level, I get that it's really a bit higher than that, but I just it feels so middle of the road to me in every single way. It feels like Hollywood just churned it out, and it's got all of the beats and the tropes that you expect. And well, yeah, we pointed out one or two things where they didn't do the obvious thing, but at the same time, though, like, can I even compliment them not letting Jeremy Sisto back on the boat? Because that's probably just following the actual events, because he probably left the boat.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where what actually happened, do you give them credit for those as like choices?
Yeah, it's almost like anytime it doesn't do the tropey thing, it's probably just because they had to follow what actually happened, and that's why it doesn't do the obvious tropey thing.
Yeah.
So
they would have loved to do the tropes the whole way through. They would have loved to stick to the script, but unfortunately reality got in the way.
Yeah. I think the most obvious thing that I have to assume is added for the movie was the speech and the hug at the end and the hearing. Like, I expect they spoke well of him and, like, helped, like, get him not punished and, like, acquitted of this, but I don't see the big group hug having actually. I mean, if it happened, then fair enough, then that's great.
Even if it did happen, I don't think Chuck was the one who started it. I feel like that's because Chuck wrote the book. That's the only reason I think he gave that to himself.
That's fair. All right, that's White Squall.
He had to do the book afterwards, and he's like, just to be clear, they didn't unseal the records for that hearing, right? Like nobody knows what was sitting there. Just want to really make that clear.
Dear. All right, that's
before we move on, did it make the collection? Did it make the collection?
Oh, I don't care. No, obviously not.
All right, I'm fine with that. Continue.
All right. Well, next week we're actually getting to the movie that the reason for this season existing even is here, and that is Twister, which is the penultimate episode of the season. Although technically the last episode of the season, if you're being strict about it being a 90s disaster movie, because the following week we're obviously going to do Twisters, which is not 90s anymore, but is a nice roll on from Twister. So Twister is next week. So we're back to a proper disaster movie next week. So look forward to that. As I said earlier on, you can get bonus shows over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and you get Criterion Cut every month on there. $5 and up, you get extra reels where we review some of the worst movies of all time. In fact, we did an extra reels this month. So on top of the monthly episode, there was a bonus one that is free for everyone. You can access it, and it was kind of a disaster movie, more of a sci-fi disaster movie, but a disaster movie all the same.
And also a movie disaster at the same time.
Yes. Solar Crisis, directed by Alan Smithy. So if you want to go hear us talk about that, you can go find that on the YouTubes or on the... If you're listening to the audio version and you want the audio track, you do have to go to Patreon for that. But that is something you can go check out. But yeah, any support, whether it be on Patreon, YouTube memberships, all of it does help and keeps the show coming. So thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. But that brings an end to the show. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We'll see you next time. Keep watching movies. And if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplonautical immunity.